Well, it's amazing how it's changed in so many different ways, and of course things like the internet have made it change as well. But if I can relate, my first World Cup was 1978 in Argentina, which Argentina won, and within 5 minutes of the final whistle I was in the Dutch dressing room conducting interviews. Today, there's no way you'd get anywhere near a dressing room to start with, and it would probably be an hour before a player or some players are brought to you. So because of the global interest, at that World Cup there were fewer teams, there were fewer matches obviously, there were fewer stadiums being used. Now you might have 10, as we were in Russia recently. So it's become an absolutely vast event. Even in India, of course, there were several stadiums used. When you think of Kerala and Goa and all the different places, Guwahati, that we went to. But the internet has changed absolutely everything in terms of the way the event is covered. There's no question about that. Technology has gone on in leaps and bounds. You know, I have relatives who say that in the last 10 years, civilization, everything has progressed much more rapidly than at any time in history of mankind. And that's a massive statement. But it's absolutely true. You know, and for an old buffer like me, it's very difficult to command. I'm not on Twitter, but I do my best with different media demands. And it's just indicative of the way things have changed, and in the next 10 or 20 years they'll change again. Yes and no. Yes and no is an easy answer for me to give in a sense, and it's one that occurs many times because there are always goods and bads and rights and wrongs. I think it is good that countries like Iceland, for example, reached their last World Cup finals. Wouldn't it be wonderful, as I've said, if India reached the World Cup finals? I think it is good because the game is expanding so much. I was in Nicaragua this year, I've been in Botswana. The football is good, it's of a high standard. So what is wrong with teams like that coming in? Where it is more difficult is in terms of coverage, and you may find that events have to be spread across 2 or 3 countries, like they are doing next time, you know, when it goes to USA and Canada and Mexico. So it's more expensive because more countries are involved, and more hotels, and more media there. Which is good for some reasons, for some people, not so bad for others. But I think the quality will be just the same because people love a shock. So therefore, when Iceland beat England in the last European Championships, people were doing this. When Germany lost in the last World Cup to Korea, people couldn't believe it almost, you know. And we have to accept that the lesser nations, supposedly lesser nations, are improving and improving rapidly. That's for the good of the game.
So you don't subscribe to the negative that has been pointed out, the dilute the quality of the competition, in so much as the allegation which is similarly leveled at the UEFA Champions League group stage.
No, I don't subscribe to that. I think other people raise their levels to the best levels, and there will always be 8 or 10 teams who are going to be hard to beat. But who would have predicted Croatia being in the final? You know, people would have predicted Germany, they would have predicted Brazil, they would have predicted Argentina. I think it's good for football that it goes the rounds. Here in England, we absolutely were thrilled 2 years ago, when Leicester City won the title, won the Premier League title. Okay, it probably didn't please Chelsea and Manchester United supporters, but for the English, we thought it was absolutely wonderful that a club like Leicester City could win the Premier League. It proves that, you know, there is still hope out there for everybody. So I do not subscribe to that, you know, that it's a lessening of quality. I think the quality will improve. I can tell you the story, and if you're lucky, I'll remember it. I'll remember them. We used to have a programme called Brain of Sport in England when I worked for the BBC on radio, and we put up a team of commentators against these people who were absolutely phenomenal in their knowledge. You know, I always say that they could tell you the name of a timekeeper in a boxing match from 1926. I mean, they had so much knowledge. So when it came to my question, because I'm not just football, by the way, I'm interested in a lot of sport. The question master, I said, just ask me to name all the teams in the County Cricket Championship, which is Derbyshire, Durham, Essex, Glamorgan, Gloucestershire, Hampshire, Kent, Lancashire, Leicestershire, Middlesex, Northampton, Notts, Somerset, Surrey, Sussex, Warwickshire, Worcestershire, Yorkshire, which took about 3 seconds. So he went, oh, okay then, yeah. Do you know anything about rugby? So I said, yeah, I know the teams in the rugby league. There is Barrow, Batley, Blackpool, Bradford, Bramley, Cardiff, Carlisle, Castleford, Chorley, Dewsbury, Doncaster, Featherstone, Fulham, Halifax, Huddersfield, Hull, Kingston Rovers, Hunslet, Huyton, Keighley, Leeds, Leeds, Nottingham, Oldham, Rochdale, Runcorn, Ellen, Salford, Sheffield, Swinton, Trafford, Wakefield, Warrington, Whitehaven, Windsor, Wigan, Workington and York, which took about another 12 seconds. That's interesting, he said. Well, you've got about another 30 seconds to name all the 92 clubs in the Football League. Well, I'll do it a little bit slowly. I always say to everybody, listen out for your team if you think I'm going to miss one out. So, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Birmingham, Brighton, Coventry, Everton, Ipswich, Leeds, Liverpool, Man City, Man United, Middlesbrough, Nottingham Forest, Notts County, Southampton, Stoke, Sunderland, Swansea, Tottenham, West Brom, West Ham, Wolves, Barnsley, Blackburn, Bolton, Cambridge, Cardiff, Charlton, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Derby, Grimsby, Leicester, Luton, Newcastle, Norwich, Oldham, Morecambe, QPR, Rotherham, Sheffield Wednesday, Shrewsbury, Watford, Wrexham, Brentford, Bristol City, Bristol Rovers, Burnley, Cardiff, Chester, Chesterfield, Doncaster, Exeter, Fulham, Gillingham, Huddersfield, Lincoln, Millwall, Newport, Oxford, Plymouth, Portsmouth, Preston, Reading, Sale, Swindon, Walton, Wimbledon, Accrington, Aldershot, Barnet, Blackpool, Bournemouth, Bradford, very close to the Crewe, Dartmouth, Halifax, Hartlepool, Hereford, Macclesfield, Mansfield, Northampton, Peterborough, Port Vale, Rochdale, Scarborough, Scunthorpe, Sheffield United, Stockport, Torquay, Tranmere, Wigan, Wycombe and York. And that was from the 1981-82 season. So if anybody says you missed out Cheltenham or you missed out Forest Green Rovers, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to do it every year. I'm not changing it. So do you think I can do it? Do you reckon I can do it? That would be longer than 26 seconds because I've slowed it down, especially for the Indian audience. You like it? You like that? Now then, I could also do Atletico de Calcutta, Bengaluru, Chennai, Delhi Dynamos, FC Goa, Kerala Blasters, Mumbai, North East, Pune, and I missed out Jamshedpur. There you go. How's that? I've never done that one before. Okay, it's quite a long question, but I will answer both. For starters, it doesn't really matter what I think it's going to happen. It will happen. There's no question about it to me. If they bring it in for the World Cup, they can hardly go and drop it. It's a question of how soon different leagues will adopt it. I was against it to start with, to be honest with you, because I think a lot of people still love the debate on a Saturday night. You go out after the game, you want to talk about it, and people argue, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there really isn't. And it puts enormous pressure on referees and officials. It really does. Having said all that, at the World Cup, what it did do, we got probably more goals than we would have had because referees gave some penalties which wouldn't have been given. They sent one or two players off, which they might have stayed on the field of play, and some goals were proved to be onside and not offside. I actually had the privilege of commentating on the very first one, which is in the France versus Australia game, the first time VAR was used, and Griezmann scored a penalty. I'm still not 100% sure it was the right decision, so there will still be a contentious area. What I do think is, having watched the Hero Indian Super League, the first 5 games of this season, first 6 games now, there have been at least 4 decisions which would have been overturned with VAR. There was one the other evening where a defender, Johnson, was clearly pushed over and the referee didn't give anything, and they didn't score as it happened. The ball went through and somebody got a shot in and the keeper made a save. We saw an incident where a goalkeeper did something he shouldn't have done. And if that had been on VAR, then he would probably have been sent off, to be honest. And there have been a couple of other occasions. I think there was certainly one where the corner should have been given and wasn't, but they won't go as deep. They won't go into that. That's too intricate. So where I stand is, it's going to happen. We might as well accept it. Let's get on with it. But yes, they do need to improve it. But that's like anything. Any innovation takes time. My other reservation to start with, which is all part of this same answer, was I thought it would be encouraging coaches and players to start doing that. And I hate that. You know, the officials, the referee, it's his job to make all the decisions. It's not a player's responsibility to do that, or the coach to put pressure on. So I think that is something to be looked at, whereby if somebody does that, they can get sent off. The coach can be sent off if he starts suggesting you've got to go and look at a television replay. That's unnecessary, but it's going to happen. Oh, absolutely. The greatest game I ever saw, I said, was in the 1982 World Cup. I was very fortunate because I did every Brazil match. I was assigned Scotland, and they just happened to be in a group with Brazil, Russia and New Zealand. And they were the greatest team I ever had the privilege to commentate on. Zico, lately of FC Goa, Falcao, Socrates, Eder, the names rolled off the tongue, and they were wonderful to watch. And I honestly, as a commentator, I should be unbiased. I could have wept when they lost to Italy, and Rossi got a hat-trick because they should have won that World Cup. They were so entertaining. Their football was absolutely exhilarating. And the other one was another World Cup match in Mexico between Denmark and Uruguay. And Michael Laudrup, who was a fine footballer, scored a goal. And I tell you this story to give you an example where sometimes fewer words are more meaningful than a lot of words. And he scored a goal. They won 6-1, but he slalomed his way through and put the ball in the net. And I just said, the boy's a genius. And that was all I needed to say, and I was pleased with that because it had far more impact than if I'd wandered on talking about, you know, all sorts of things. And the last one was the most amazing probably game I've been at, World Cup Brazil, when Germany were 5 goals up after 28 minutes against the host nation, Brazil, and our director was cutting up shots of the crowd leaving after 28 minutes, some of them crying because their nation had been humiliated, and I will never forget that as long as I live. Yes, it was sad, but it was still a privilege to be there. I mean, let's not forget Germany were pretty good. Yes, what happened there was interesting because it was an off-the-ball incident with Zidane and Materazzi, and I got criticised, funnily enough, afterwards by some people because they said I should have just stuck to what the pictures were. Now, nobody saw the headbutt, but I saw it, and I thought, well, there's got to be retrospective action here. So I said, what has he done? And people might have thought, what's he talking about? But then I obviously said, Zidane has headbutted Materazzi. Fortunately for me, there was one camera slaved on Zidane, and they eventually found it after a long time, and it was there, and the referee had to send him off. So I like to think that I was justified in what I've done in my calling of that incident. Yeah, one of the moments in World Cup history that will go down forever in folklore, in football and folklore.
Do you believe that sending off doesn't happen? The result?
The result would have been different if Zidane had stayed on. It's impossible to say, isn't it? But yeah, he probably would, because I think he was the greatest player in the world at the time. We're still talking about his mesmeric footwork now. And he just saw red because of what Materazzi said to him. And it worked for the Italians. So they had a great side, France. You know, they had Deschamps, and they had Henry, and they had some terrific footballers at that time, Desailly. They probably would have won it, yeah. Very strange, Italy. If you go back to 1990 in their own country, they started really slowly. They were really poor. There were some shocking performances, and a guy called Schillaci got them through it. He scored some goals. And they've had a habit over the years of playing really poorly in the early matches. In Spain in 1982, I think they drew 0-0 with Cameroon, and they had a poor result against Peru, and they start slowly. But they become more resilient as the tournament progresses, a bit like Germany do, to be honest with you. And some nations just have more resilience than others. And it is interesting to see the pattern and to see how the characteristics of players from Latin American countries as opposed to African countries, it is reflected in the way they play. It's strange, and you keep thinking it's going to change, and it never does. You know, it becomes a bit of a stereotype for us to say that the Africans need to be more disciplined, but it's true. It happens. Well, one day, hopefully, it'll change. What I really enjoy when I come to India is that we have a little clinic, a little session between all the commentators, whether it's Bengali and Malayalam, Punjabi, and I talk to them about my life and about the way I believe that commentary should go, the way it should evolve, the way they should do it, and they're all engrossed, and I'm delighted to say that. We have a lovely rapport. Things have changed because in the days when I was starting out, and I began in 1959, by the way, in written journalism, I've only been doing television since 1980-81. I was spelling radio before that, and I'm really glad I've done all branches of journalism, newspapers, radio and television. Accessibility is the thing that's changed. In my days, we were friends, the journalists were friends with all the famous footballers. The England World Cup team of 1966, Banks, Coyne, Wilson, Styles, Charlton, Moore, Ball, Hunt, Bobby Charlton, Martin Peters, Jeff Hurst. I knew them all. Most of them are still alive. I've still got all their phone numbers. We're all friends. Every time we meet, we have a drink together, we chat, we talk about the old days. I don't know a single Premier League footballer now, and I won't do, and I haven't done for 10 years. Because you had a personal relationship with the manager, with the players, you could ring them up at any time. During the week, you play golf together. That's never ever going to happen again. Now that's changed. So today's journalists, today's commentators have to realise that they have to get their information via other sources. And what they do have now is this fantastic thing called the internet, whereby they can go on Wikipedia, they can go on websites, they can go on chat forums, and that's the way they get their information nowadays. It's very different. Some of that is sad, because I like to think that they are human beings, these fellas, you know, despite the fact they're wonderful footballers, and I think they'd like to have a relationship, some of them, with the media. Some of them are nervous about it now. It's the managers who are more nervous than anybody. So for journalists, they have to find different avenues to glean information that's vital to doing the job properly. That's a very good question. Apparently when I was a tiny little boy, 5, I used to dribble a tennis ball on the way to school. My school was about, I don't know, half a mile away, and I used to commentate on me dribbling. I was Stanley Matthews, who was a great player in 1953, and I commentated on cricket, and because I'm still involved in cricket in the Bradford League in England. I'm a president of a club, and Jim Laker, off-spin bowler, was my hero because he went to the same school, and I used to commentate on cricket matches according to my teacher, Mrs. Dunwell. So I think I was destined for this sort of a career. And my father was very good because he said, that's all fathers do, what do you want to do? He worked in the wool trade in Bradford in England, and I said, I don't want to do that. Definitely, I want to go and watch sport. I want to watch football and cricket and talk about it. So I think from a very early age I knew what I wanted to do, but I couldn't possibly have dreamt that I'd be still talking about it, loving every minute of it and doing it 70 years later, which is what it is. I was 5 at the time. So here I am, 70 odd years on, still loving every single second of it. I'll tell you, lucky boy.
We all love them, they're a lovely club, and they now have the right to